He's very powerful. I've never felt power like it, to be honest, from any other martial arts actor.
Really?
The speed and the power that he has.
What happened to Tony Jaa, the martial arts legend who once lit up the screen with jaw-dropping stunts and lightning-fast moves, is nothing short of heartbreaking. This man, who seemed invincible, suddenly vanished from the limelight at the height of his career. But why? What could have driven such a powerhouse out of Hollywood and back to Thailand, leaving behind an audience desperate for more? Let's discover the truth. Tony Jaa, born and raised in the rural stretches of Surin Province, Thailand, grew up surrounded by simplicity. His parents, Rensipit and Thong Di Yum, were rice farmers who worked tirelessly in the fields. Life was quiet, and the rhythms of the day were steady, but young Tony, even at a very early age, dreamed of something more. He was fascinated by the heroes he saw on the screen at temple fairs: Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and Jet Li, martial arts icons who seemed to move with superhuman grace and power. Those films planted a seed deep in his heart. Tony would stand in the rice paddies and mimic their moves, kicking and punching the air, determined to replicate their skills. He didn't just want to fight, he wanted to move like they did, to be like them. For Tony, these idols weren't just actors performing stunts. To him, they embodied strength, courage, and beauty in motion. In Drunken Master, also because of how they do the stunt, it's black FP and kick, and, like Kung Fu style. This Kung Fu is a different style, like Jackie Chan, Jet Li, and Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee is original, What they did was so beautiful, so heroic, that I wanted to do it too, Tony said in a 2004 interview. He would practice for hours, trying to master the techniques he'd seen on screen, repeating the moves until they felt natural, like breathing. But Tony's journey was not just about learning moves. It was about pushing his body beyond its limits, a relentless pursuit of perfection. And that journey began at the local temple. At the age of 10, Tony started training in Muay Thai, a martial art that would become the foundation of his career. It was here, in the modest setting of a temple, where Tony first began honing the discipline that would later make him a global sensation. His training wasn't glamorous, there were no fancy gyms, no professional trainers. Just Tony, his young determination, and the guidance of local masters. As he grew older, his skills sharpened. He fought in small local matches, making a name for himself in a sport that was brutal and unforgiving. But it wasn't enough for Tony. He didn't want to be just another Muay Thai fighter. He wanted to be something more, someone who could bridge the gap between martial arts and the world of cinema, just like his idols had done. Fate took a turn when Punna Ridikrai, a seasoned stuntman and director, discovered Tony. Punna saw something in the young fighter, a spark that he couldn't ignore. He invited Tony to join his stunt team. Tony eagerly accepted, seeing it as a stepping stone toward his dreams. For the next 14 years, Tony worked as a stuntman, throwing himself into dangerous scenes with little recognition. He doubled for other actors, performing the high-risk stunts that others couldn't or wouldn't do. He even stood in for Sammo Hung in a commercial where he had to leap onto an elephant's back, holding onto its tusks midair. It was hard work, often painful, but Tony endured, knowing that each stunt brought him closer to his goal. Being a stuntman was grueling. Tony's body was constantly pushed to its limits, but he never complained. The years he spent in the shadows, performing stunts for other people's glory, were a test of his endurance and patience. He wasn't in the spotlight, but he was learning, refining his skills, and waiting for the moment when he would no longer have to stand behind someone else's fame. That moment finally arrived in 2003 with the release of Ong-Bak, Muay Thai Warrior. The film wasn't just another action movie, it was Tony's breakout role, his chance to show the world what he was capable of. And he didn't disappoint. In Ong-Bak, Tony performed every stunt himself without the help of wires or computer-generated effects. It was pure, raw athleticism on display, and audiences were stunned by his acrobatic feats and fluid fighting style. But the film wasn't without its risks. Tony suffered multiple injuries during filming, including a serious ligament injury and a sprained ankle. One of the most dangerous scenes involved Tony fighting while his trousers were on fire. "I actually got burned," Tony recalled in a 2005 interview. "I really had to concentrate because once my pants were on fire, the flames spread upwards very fast. They burned my eyebrows, my eyelashes, and my nose. Then we had to do a couple more takes to get it right." It was a dangerous, painful experience, but Tony didn't flinch. He knew what was at stake. This was his chance, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. The success of Ong-Bak catapulted Tony into international stardom. His second major film, Tom Yum Goong, known as The Protector in the US, cemented his reputation as one of the greatest martial artists of his generation. The film represented a unique style of Muay Thai that mimicked the movements of elephants, paying homage to Thailand's cultural heritage. Tony's star was rising quickly. But with fame came pressure. He was no longer just a stuntman, he was the face of a new generation of martial arts cinema, and the weight of those expectations began to take its toll. In the midst of his growing fame, Tony's life behind the scenes was far from glamorous. His relationship with his mentor, Punna Ridikrai, began to fracture over creative differences, leading to the cancellation of one of Tony's planned films, Sword. There were whispers of tension, but neither Tony nor Punna commented publicly on their falling out. It was a difficult period for Tony, who was juggling the pressures of stardom with personal and professional challenges. Even his hero, Jackie Chan, took notice of Tony's talent and tried to cast him in Rush Hour 3. "I see so many action stars in the world, he's one of them, very, very physical," Chan remarked. Still, Tony's busy schedule with Ong-Bak 2 prevented him from taking the role. Despite the opportunity to work with his idol, Tony remained focused on his projects. Yet, the demands were beginning to pile up. By 2010, Tony had reached a breaking point. After years of pushing his body and spirit to the limit, he retreated from the spotlight. He became a Buddhist monk, seeking peace and clarity in the simple life of the temple. For a brief time, he left behind the chaos of the film industry, trading stunts and fame for meditation and solitude. But even the peace of the monastery couldn't last forever. After a period of reflection, Tony returned to the screen, once again stepping into the world that had both made him and worn him down. Upon his return, he found some stability in his personal life. In 2012, he married his longtime girlfriend, Parit Chadiwatana, and together they welcomed 2 daughters. For a while, it seemed like Tony had found a balance, a place where he could be both a global star and a devoted husband and father. But the pressures of fame never truly went away. The pull between his desire for a quiet life and the expectations placed upon him was constant. But what happened to Tony Jaa is beyond heartbreaking. In one of these podcasts, the host went on to say that the first time you saw Tony Jaa in Ong-Bak, you probably didn't know what you were in for. It was more than just a martial arts film, it was an experience that hit you like a truck. You didn't see it coming, but once that first kick landed in that gritty Bangkok bar, you were sold. There was something raw, something different about the way Jaa moved. You couldn't help but watch, and by the end, you were convinced you had just witnessed something special. You weren't alone. The world was watching, too. But years later, you find yourself wondering what happened. How did the guy who took the world by storm suddenly seem to fade into the background? Everyone was talking about it. Videos popped up, fans speculated, and stories were told. They called it the rise and fall of Tony Jaa. They called him the next Bruce Lee. Some said he was a one-hit wonder. It's easy to talk when you're on the outside looking in, but the truth isn't always what it seems. Do you remember when Ong-Bak came out? Martial arts movies were different after that. Even Donnie Yen admitted he had to step up his game after watching Jaa. His influence was immediate. Fight scenes shifted from the polished, choreographed dances of Chinese opera to something grittier, more brutal. In Tom Yum Goong, The Protector for some, he cranked it up even higher. The relentless action, the iconic fight scenes, and the continuous 4-minute take in the restaurant were pure chaos, but in the best way. It felt like Jaa was walking through a video game, breaking bodies on his way to the final boss. But just as fast as he rose, things began to unravel. The hype was there. The fans were watching. But behind the scenes, trouble was brewing. People talked about how Jaa went crazy, how he disappeared in the middle of filming Ong-Bak 2, or how he ran off to become a monk. When the movie finally came out, it felt like a sprint to the finish line. It wasn't bad, Jaa showed off every move in his playbook, but the energy wasn't the same. And then came Ong-Bak 3, and the magic felt like it had drained out of him. By the time it was over, it seemed like even Jaa just wanted to be done with it all. The break he took after that wasn't just some rumor. He really did step back and spend time in a temple, away from it all. When he came back, there was hope he'd pick up where he left off. He made the sequel to Tom Yum Goong, but the spark had dimmed. Hollywood came calling, though. You saw him in Fast and Furious 7, standing alongside Vin Diesel, or in XXX, Return of Xander Cage, fighting side by side with Donnie Yen. But something was missing. You caught glimpses of the old Tony Jaa, but the roles felt like shadows of what he could do. And yet, the rumors kept flying. People said he wasn't the same after becoming a monk. They blamed his English, saying he couldn't break into Hollywood because of the language barrier. Some said it was the loss of his mentor, Punna Ridikrai, that took the fight out of him. But most of it wasn't true, or at least not the way people made it out to be. The monk thing? It's common in Thai culture. Spending a short time in a temple is a tradition, not some life-altering event. English? He worked on it, and by 2014, he was giving interviews in English with no problem. And as for his mentor? Who's to say how much that affected him? Only Jaa really knows. But what you need to hear in these stories is the part no one talks about, the role of Sahamankal Film. Jaa was locked into an exclusive contract with them. They controlled everything, his schedule, his appearances, even how much money he made. When you saw him out promoting Ong-Bak instead of creating new movies, that wasn't Jaa's choice. It was the studio. They even took care of his family, which, in Thai culture, is no small thing. It's not just about taking care of yourself. If your family isn't provided for, you can end up in real trouble. When Jaa finally broke away from Sahamankal in 2013, it was a turning point in his career, but by then, so much had already changed. It wasn't without a fight. They tried to block his role in Fast and Furious 7 and even demanded $50 million at one point. The studio wanted to keep him from going, and after all that, Jaa hasn't worked on a Thai production since. Every movie you've seen him in recently, Skin Trade, Never Back Down, Triple Threat, those were all Western productions. He hasn't made a single movie in Thailand in years, and that's a big part of the story no one's telling. You can't help but wonder, what if things had gone differently? What if the studio hadn't controlled so much of his life? Would he have become the next Bruce Lee, the way everyone thought he would? Or was it inevitable that things would turn out the way they did? These are questions without easy answers. Tony Jaa, or Jaa Phantom as they call him in Thailand, is still around and making movies, but the fire that burned so brightly in Ong-Bak feels like it's flickering now. And maybe that's just the way things go sometimes. Life takes you down paths you didn't expect, and the person you were at the start isn't the same by the time you get to the end. He's an actor in a story. Whether he's fighting or simply playing his part, he follows what the directors and stunt coordinators tell him to do. That's how it is. When Bruce Lee was in Hong Kong, he had almost complete control over everything on set. Now take Jaa Phantom. After The Protector 2, he has yet to make movies in Thailand. It's in Thailand where he would have the most control over the fights, the story, everything. Maybe not directing, especially after the disaster of Ong-Bak 2, which had all sorts of problems, but by now, perhaps he's learned his lesson. Bruce Lee's movies were like auditions for him, trying to secure a big Hollywood role. His plan, if he had lived, was to make one movie in Hollywood and one in Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, he could do what he wanted. In Hollywood, though, he'd have to play by the rules. That's probably the biggest lesson Jaa Phantom could take from Bruce Lee, learning how to balance. Then there's the part of accepting who you are. Bruce Lee was an actor through and through. He started acting as a little kid, and even when he moved to America and focused on martial arts, eventually, he realized acting was a better way to spread his message, so he stepped back into that world. But Jaa Phantom, he was a stuntman first. His mentor brought him in on a project to display him and give him a platform, and that's different from Bruce. Do you remember when Bruce Lee said in an interview that, for him, it was important to know why his character was fighting? That's something Jaa Phantom's movies often miss. His fights are a display of his amazing skills, but you're left wondering if they really serve a purpose. There's another thing too. Think about how little Jaa Phantom's characters actually speak. In Ong-Bak, the most memorable line is just his name and where he's from. In Tom Yum Goong, he runs around asking, "Where's my elephant?" for most of the movie. It's a joke. He even made a cameo in The Bodyguard 2, where he yells the same line, looking for a stuffed elephant this time, and beats up people using the same moves from his earlier fight scenes. Now here's something no one really talks about when they bring up Jaa Phantom. We see him as this serious guy pulling off incredible stunts, but we miss the bigger picture. His biggest movies, Ong-Bak and Tom Yum Goong, they're not just action movies. His character is a straight man in a comedy. There's always that silly sidekick, right? The one with the most lines, the one who keeps the story moving. Tony Jaa may not have followed the path fans imagined for him, but that doesn't mean he's fallen. Sometimes life is more than stardom. Success is more than living up to someone else's expectations. So is it a fall from grace or a different kind of success? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.